UFC Rio is going down on October 11th, which means it's time for me to go through and give you guys my full card predictions, breaking down every single matchup, main card, and the prelims, picking the winner and how I think they get it done. If you guys enjoy the video, do me a huge favor, hit that like button and subscribe. Timestamps are going to be down below in the description. And then also just a shout out to Mateusz Gamrot, stepping in on short notice, pretty much saving this card because without the main event, Charles Oliveira on this fight night, it's probably looking rough. And then also shout out to Charles taking on a different stylistic matchup on very short notice. So let's just dive right into the prelims here, starting off with Saimon Oliveira taking on Luan Lacerda. These are two guys who have really struggled so far in their UFC careers. Oliveira is 0-3 in the UFC. Kind of fortunate he's even getting a fourth opportunity here on this card. He has not won a fight since 2021, and that was a split decision win on the Contender Series. In his 3 UFC fights, he was out-grappled by Tony Gravely in a fight that went the distance, and then he was knocked out on the feet by David Martinez and Daniel Marcos. He is a dangerous submission threat. 11 of his 18 wins have been by sub, but he's also kind of willing to just get control grappled, try to play jiu-jitsu, like we saw in that Tony Gravely fight where he ended up just, spending a large portion of that fight on his back. On the other side here with Lacerda, he has also not picked up a win in the UFC, 0-2 in the promotion. Long layoff here. He has not fought since all the way back in 2023, and then his last win was all the way back in 2022. I think for Lacerda, he's actually shown like some level of success. Obviously not picking up a win within the UFC, but he had a strong case in his fight against Cody Stamann. Potentially should have gone his direction. Cody Stamann, like very respectable opponent, especially for someone, kind of just debuting in the UFC. He is also primarily a grappler. 10 of his 12 wins are by submission. I think it's tough to trust either of these dudes. Neither have proven they can kind of get over the hump and pick up a win within the UFC. But I do think Lacerda has just proven to be better against UFC level competition. I'm going to pick Lacerda to get this one done by sub. That's how both these guys win. I'm going to go round 2 submission for Lacerda. Then we have Julia Polastri taking on Karolina Kowalkiewicz. Polastri is 1-2 in the UFC, but I like her style. I think she's fun. She's got that dog in her. And her 2 losses have been to pretty solid opponents, Lupe Godinez and Josephine Knudsen. She's tough. She's durable. She has very good cardio. She's not going to quit on herself like we saw in that Lupe Godinez fight where she went down 2 rounds, but was really kind of putting the pressure on Lupe, really landing some solid shots in that final round. She also showcased some grappling success in the fight against Josephine Knudsen. On the other side, did kind of struggle in that department against Lupe. On the other side with Karolina Kowalkiewicz, she's kind of had a very interesting UFC career arc where she started off really strong, built her way up to a title shot against her fellow Pole, I think that's how you'd say it, against Joanna Jędrzejczyk. She loses that fight, goes on a 5-fight losing streak. I think she did retire or strongly considered retiring, but then she ends up going on a 4-fight win streak. Now she is on back-to-back losses. Once she kind of upped the competition, that's where she got back in the L column. But she is someone who can throw a lot of volume out there, good cardio. She's landed 139 and 141 significant strikes in her last 2 wins. The issue is she just doesn't really have a ton of danger factor. Not a great submission artist. She really has no power on the feet. Like, she's not landed a single UFC knockdown in her career, and she is kind of just physically limited. She's not the most elite athlete. She does kind of struggle to get up if you do take her down. So I think Polastri is going to come in here. I think she hits harder on the feet. I trust her durability a little bit more. I also think she can mix things up, get the grappling going, land some takedowns, rack up some control time. So I'm going to take Julia Polastri by decision. Then moving all the way up to heavyweight, we have Valter Walker taking on Mohammad Usman. And Valter Walker's on kind of one of the craziest streaks I think we've seen in MMA history or UFC history, where he is on a 3-fight heel hook streak. Heel hooks are not something you see a ton, especially in modern MMA. And doing it up at heavyweight is just kind of wild. And I think it's clear at this point, with at least that one technique, he just has a massive skill gap relative to the other kind of like lower level heavyweights he is going up against. He doesn't have great wrestling, but he is fairly aggressive. Like, he's going to push the pace. Even if he's, not landing that initial shot, he'll get you in the clinch. He'll try to trip you up from there. When he does get you down, he doesn't have the most dangerous ground and pound. I mean, pretty much all of his UFC success on the ground has come from the heel hook. which seems like a somewhat unreliable path to victory, but he has been able to replicate it in 3 straight fights. And also, it's not like he's hitting it the same way every time. Like, I think the most recent one against Kennedy and Zechiku was he kind of had his back on the cage and then dropped into it. He's also hit it, from being on top. So can do it creatively. It's not like he's a sole one-trick pony in just like one specific spot. I guess he's a one-trick pony in the heel hook, but can hit it from different positions. On the other side here with Usman, he has a 4-2 UFC record, which is solid. He has just gone up against pretty weak competition. He has been outlanded in significant strikes in 5 of his 6 fights. He doesn't have a ton of power on the feet, only 1 knockdown in those 6 matchups. And then he does have fairly untested takedown defense. He was taken down twice by Thomas Petersen, but really just hasn't been tested there a ton. I'm going to lean towards Valter Walker in this fight. I trust his cardio a little bit more than Usman's. And if I'm picking Walker and he's won 3 straight fights by heel hook, I feel like that's just what I have to roll with. So I'll go with Valter Walker by sub. You would think Usman's team is just like drilling him constantly to not get caught in that, but it's heavyweight. I don't think Usman is the most skilled guy. I'm going to ride with Valter Walker. Then going down, I believe this is 125, we have Lucas Rocha taking on Stewart Nicoll. Rocha's 17-2 as a pro. He was submitted in his UFC debut. Same thing happened to Stewart Nicoll. But for Rocha here, he has 10 knockout wins, 4 submission wins, had a really nasty knee knockout on the Contender Series. That was impressive. But we've also seen him get out-grappled in both of his fights. So on the Contender Series prior to the knockout, he was getting out-grappled, and then he was pretty thoroughly out-grappled in his UFC debut. I believe it was against Clayton Carpenter, who was also going to be on this card a little bit later on. On the other side for Nicoll, like I mentioned, he lost his UFC debut, was guillotined. He has an 8-1 record, so pre-UFC was undefeated. Really just like rolled through his competition, but it was fairly weak, strength of schedule. He has 4 wins by knockout, 3 by submission. In this matchup, I do prefer Nicoll's ability to kind of mix things up, use his grappling. We've seen Rocha struggle in that realm, so I think Nicoll's going to mix it up. I don't think he's going to find a finish, but I think he is going to pick up a decision win. Then moving back to the women's MMA, we have Irina Alekseeva taking on Beatriz Mesquita. For Alekseeva here, she is 1-2 in the UFC, coming off of back-to-back losses against Claudio Saigula and Melissa Mullins, and she has been out-grappled in back-to-back fights. That's kind of been an issue for her. And that's not great when you consider her opponent here, Mesquita, who is a 10-time IBJJF world champion. She is 5-0 in MMA, all finishes. On the feet, she's not great. She's a little bit stiff, but she's fine. Like, she's serviceable in that area. But I do think it's going to be a big problem if Alekseeva cannot stuff the takedowns. And I just trust Mesquita's grappling more in this matchup. Now, there have been some issues for some of these like highly credentialed jiu-jitsu players coming into the UFC where the wrestling isn't there. And, it's just kind of a different realm. We saw that. The guy's name is slipping me, but the recent heavyweight who came over from ONE and he wasn't able to pick up the win. I do think, though, in women's MMA, like women's bantamweight, I do think the skill gap is still going to be there. Even if she's not the best wrestler, I think she'll get the fight to the ground. And I think she picks up a submission win, keeps her 100% finish rate going. So I'm going to go with Mesquita by round 2 submission. Then going up to heavyweight, we have Vitor Petrino taking on Thomas Petersen. And I just think there is going to be an extreme athleticism advantage in this matchup. Vitor Petrino, former 205er, moved up to heavyweight. It kind of seems like a smart move considering just how much lower the skill level is at heavyweight compared to light heavyweight. But he's 6'2" with a 77.5-inch reach. The dude is built like a tank. Thomas Petersen's listed at 6'1", 74-inch reach. I do think in the cage, Petrino's just going to look like the much more imposing guy. He's finished 9 of his 12 wins, 7 by knockout, 2 by submission. In his first fight up at heavyweight, he picked up a round 1 submission win. He does have some fairly untested takedown defense. Really has not been heavily wrestled in his recent fights, but I think it was his debut or maybe his second fight against Anton Turkalj in the UFC. He shot on him 15 times, landed 5 of them. So that's going to be the path to victory here for Petersen. He has a high motor at heavyweight. He's not a great athlete, but he does have that dog in him. He's going to push a grappling heavy pace. He averages 4.4 takedowns per 15 minutes. He's landed at least one takedown in all 4 of his UFC fights. On the feet, he really doesn't have a ton of power. I think even if he gets the fight to the ground, he doesn't have a ton of finishing upside, and then he has been knocked out in 2 of his 3 losses. So this fight's interesting. I think this is a fight where it could kind of be a trap for Petrino. If he can't get that early finish and Petersen starts to build, starts to get his grappling going, this could end up being a tough night for Petrino. But I feel like I just have to bank on his physical tools. I'm going to pick him to get this fight done early. I'm going to say Vitor Petrino, round 1 knockout. Now moving all the way down to flyweight, we have a fun grappling matchup here between Clayton Carpenter and Jafel Filho. Is it Filho? Fialho? I'll go with Filho here, but he has a 2-2 UFC record. Both his wins are round 1 submissions. He has 16 pro wins, 5 are by knockout, 10 are submission. Only 1 went the distance in terms of his wins. He's coming off a very competitive grappling heavy loss to Nascimento, which was a fight that he was in position to win, but he kind of made the mistake of attempting to attack submissions over just locking down the position, which did lead to his loss there. So some questionable fight IQ when he does get to the ground. On the other side here with Clayton Carpenter, 2-1 UFC record, has also finished his 2 wins by sub. He's coming off a unanimous decision loss to Tagir Ulanbekov, a fight that he was out-grappled in, but also like a pretty tough matchup, a tough opponent for someone who's only had 2 fights within the promotion. He's got this very stocky build, solid jiu-jitsu. He doesn't look like he'd have great jiu-jitsu, but he does. I'm expecting a back and forth grappling match here. I do kind of just lean towards Carpenter because I trust his fight IQ a little bit more. I think if he lands the takedown, I trust that he is just going to take the control time. He is not going to make a big mistake and give up position, whereas I don't feel as confident with Jafel. So I'm going to go with Clayton Carpenter. Going to pick him by decision. I think both guys are live for a submission, but I'm going to say it goes the full 15. Then we have Lucas Almeida taking on Michael Aswell. For Almeida here, 2-3 UFC record. Outside the UFC, and I guess, in one of his UFC wins, he has been a finisher. He's finished 14 of his 15 wins, 9 by knockout, 5 by submission. Within the UFC, he has looked a little bit chinny. He's also been out-grappled in a few of his fights. Hasn't really had much grappling success of his own. 0 UFC takedowns. And then defending takedowns, only a 53% takedown accuracy. On the feet, he has a nice left hook. I do think he is going to have the faster hands, be the quicker fighter in this matchup against Aswell. For Aswell, he's a guy who's going to come in. He likes to push the pace. He likes to pressure forward. In his 2 fights, so one on the Contender Series, one in the UFC, he landed 155 and 118 significant strikes. So he is putting a lot of volume out there. He's very boxing heavy, not going to throw a ton of kicks. Also not someone who's gone to the wrestling. Didn't attempt a single takedown in the Contender Series fight or his UFC debut. On the feet, he is kind of limited in the power department. He can throw a lot out there, but his shots don't have a ton of sting on them. He is very durable. He's tough to, actually put down. Never been finished in his MMA career. I think this is going to be a really fun fight. You kind of have like the lack of finishing, but solid durability with Aswell going up against more of the dangerous striker in Almeida, but a guy who also is a little bit chinny. I think could potentially get knocked out in this matchup. So I think this fight's going to be very competitive. I think there could be big moments on both sides. I'm going to lean towards Almeida here to pick up the decision. I think it's possible he just kind of gets melted on the feet and gets overwhelmed, but he's kind of held up in some of these tough back and forth fights. I think he has the upside to have some of the bigger moments, so Almeida will be my pick. Then we have a matchup between Ricardo Ramos taking on Khan Offley. For Ramos here, he hasn't had a ton of success since moving up to 145. At bantamweight, he has a 4-1 record in the UFC. Up at 145, a 4-5 record. Kind of an interesting skill set where I'd say he's primarily a grappler, but he just like randomly has 2 spinning back elbow knockouts within the UFC. 7 of his pro wins are by submission. He hasn't handled like the higher quality featherweights super well. Like his losses are 2 respectable names: Lerone Murphy, Zubaira Tuhugov, Charles Jourdain, Julian Erosa, Chepe Mariscal, I believe was his most recent fight, one he lost in. But on the other side here with Offley, he's 0-2 in the UFC. He was knocked out by Myron Santos. I believe that was the tough finale. And then he lost in his most recent fight a decision against Mohammad Naimov. I think the issue here for Offley is that he just doesn't look super UFC caliber in any area, where athletically he doesn't really stand out. He's undersized for featherweight, 5'7" with a 66-inch reach. That is like women's flyweight reach right there for Offley. And then he's a grappler, but he hasn't been able to land a single takedown in either of his UFC fights. On the feet, he just kind of looks outgunned and overwhelmed. Like, he doesn't look super confident, and he's kind of just very passive. In his most recent fight against Naimov, we saw he wasn't comfortable landing the takedown, and then he wasn't comfortable at range, so he tried to just kind of stall the fight out in the clinch, and that could potentially be a path to victory here against Ramos, but like, that style of win, that overall style is just not really something I want to bank on. So I'm going to take Ricardo Ramos here by decision. I think Offley is going to be safe. I don't think Ramos has like the craziest power on the feet unless he is landing that spinning back elbow, but I do think Ramos gets it done here by decision. Then another heavyweight fight. We've got a few of these heavyweight fights on this card. We have Jonata Diniz taking on Mario Pinto. I really like this matchmaking. At heavyweight, I don't love seeing like the striking heavy guys with terrible takedown defense going up against like the more like sloppy overall like grapplers, wrestlers. It's just not super entertaining. If you're going to have these heavyweights with a ton of power that want to stand and bang, let those two guys fight each other. That's what we have here with Diniz taking on Pinto. Diniz has a 3-1 UFC record, coming off a decision win against Alvin Hines. He's a powerful kickboxer, very limited in the grappling department, but I don't think he's really going to get tested a ton there. I will point out he did kind of fade in his most recent fight, but Alvin Hines came in, had good cardio even on short notice. I do actually think he tested positive for some banned substance after the fight, so that might have played a factor there. But you'd also like to see like a debuting heavyweight short notice. You'd like to see Diniz find a finish, especially if the fight's primarily taking place on the feet. That unfortunately did not happen. On the other side here with Pinto, he is a big frame, 6'5", 79-inch reach, undefeated, 10-0, 7 knockouts, 1 submission win, very young, like one of the better, if not like the best prospect at heavyweight, 27 years old. He picked up a round 2 knockout in his UFC debut. Like I said, I really like the matchmaking here. I'm expecting a striking battle between these two guys. I've kind of gone back and forth here with the winner pick. Like, I think Diniz has a lot more experience against better competition. On the other side with Pinto, I think he's a little bit more physically gifted, and he doesn't have like the same wear and tear on the body and chin as Jonata Diniz. So I'm going to lean towards Pinto here. I'm going to say he finds the knockout in round 2. And then I think this fight really heats up with these last 3 matchups here. The first one is going to be Vicente Luque taking on Joel Alvarez. And unfortunately, I do think Luque is kind of cooked at this point. And this is a little bit cruel, putting him up against someone as dangerous as Joel Alvarez. So for Luque, he is 2-4 in his last 6 fights. One of those wins was just like an awful clinch fest 5-rounder against RDA, who was also washed. And then he picked up like a very quick submission win against Temba Garimbo, I think within his last like couple of fights. And Luque, it's kind of sad because he used to be a guy who would really thrive in like these back and forth dogfights. He was durable, he would take some shots, but he would come back, he would find finishes, whether it was by submission or by knockout. He has 16 UFC wins and has finished 14 of them. Like, that's a pretty insane finish rate against really strong competition. But as of late, the durability, even like the will to win seemingly has kind of faded with him. You know, he was submitted for the first time in the UFC against Kevin Holland. The Jeff Neal fight, I don't think that was him like quitting or anything, but man, Jeff Neal just put a beating on him. And then the Joaquin Buckley fight, that was the big one where it was like ground and pound, but nothing crazy. And he kind of just shelled up and was like, I'm good. So you don't love to see that, especially when he's going up against someone as dangerous as Joel Alvarez, who is finally making the move up to 155. He's always been a massive lightweight, 6'3" with a 77-inch reach. He's dangerous everywhere. He has finished all 22 of his pro wins, 5 by knockout, 17 by submission, but he's gotten a lot more comfortable on the feet and more dangerous on the feet within the UFC, where he actually has more knockouts than submissions in the promotion. 7-2 UFC record, 4 by knockout, 3 by submission. He uses that long frame, kicks, the front kicks, really dangerous knees, sharp elbows. His super long arms also help him with a lot of submissions. Kind of a crazy stat with Joel Alvarez is that he did not stuff a takedown, a single takedown, not one, in his first UFC fights. He was just very willing to kind of play guard, play the jiu-jitsu game, or just like jump a guillotine right on the takedown. Now in the last few fights, he's a little bit less willing to just accept that bottom position, which I think overall is a good thing. Like you saw that really become an issue in the Arman Tsarukyan fight, where like Arman was just not scared at all of his ground game, took him down, just beat the brakes off of him with some vicious ground and pound. So that's a good development in his game. I think he's going to come out early. I think he's going to come out aggressive. I just feel like Vicente Luque is going to wilt. I think Joel Alvarez is going to pick up the round 1 knockout. If Luque, turned back the clock and looked good, I'd be super happy. I just don't really see it happening. So Alvarez by round 1 knockout will be the pick. Then in the co-main, we have Deiveson Figueiredo taking on Montel Jackson. And honestly, just like the matchup, the time this fight is taking place, like this is just a tough one for Figgy. He had a fight-ending knee injury against Corey Sandhagen on May 3rd. Corey Sandhagen, fighting 2 days after I'm recording this. The dude who won the fight, Figgy looked like he had some sort of extremely dangerous, like potentially career-threatening knee injury. He is coming back 1 week later. That seems less than ideal. Now his agent came out, said that he didn't need surgery, he just needed rehab, but still, only a 4-month layoff. It doesn't seem great. Also, he's aging, he's 37 years old, fighting in the second lightest weight class. And it's also just a tough matchup given the skill set of Montel Jackson. He's 9-2 in the UFC. I think you can make a strong case he's the hardest hitting bantamweight. He's landed knockdowns in 7 of his last 8 fights. He is a huge frame, 5'10", 75-inch reach. I have no idea how this guy makes 135 compared to Figgy, who's 5'5", 68-inch reach. Montel Jackson, really nice straight shots, doesn't really overcommit, doesn't overextend a ton, doesn't leave a ton of openings for him to get countered. Montel's got nice straight shots on the feet. He doesn't really overextend, doesn't really load up. He just kind of throws these short straight shots and they just have a lot of power. We have seen his one weakness has been his grappling, specifically being taken down. In his 2 UFC losses, he was controlled for a combined 13 minutes. So I do think that should be the game plan here for Figgy. Montel Jackson, a sub 70% takedown defense. And now I don't want people to think I'm sleeping on Figgy. I am very aware of how good of a fighter Figgy is. He's super well-rounded. On the feet, he hits like a tank. Believe he's still the only man to ever drop Pantoja and also the only man to ever drop Chito Vera. And that's him moving up, right? From flyweight to bantamweight and being the first man to put Chito down. And then I think he has an underrated ground game. Very good wrestling, very solid submission offense. I just think up at 135, I don't know if he's going to have the same grappling success. I just have a tough time trusting him in this matchup at this stage in his career. And I also don't think he has the best fight IQ. If I think the path to victory is he just goes super grappling heavy, I don't necessarily trust, I don't know if it's him or his team to really go out there and execute it. The Corey Sandhagen fight, he was just hanging out in these really bad positions. It cost him with a lot of ground and pound that he absorbed. And then, the fight finisher where they're in that 50-50 position, Corey Sandhagen gets the better of him and it looked like he blew out his knee. Apparently he didn't. As you can probably tell, I'm going to go with Montel Jackson. I've been going back and forth between knockout and decision, even though, he is very powerful. He's not super aggressive. He's not going to force a finish. If Figgy's just going to stay on the outside and, fight passively, Montel Jackson isn't going to force anything. He'll just leg kick him. He'll jab him. He's not going to, force the issue to find a finish. But I do just think Montel Jackson is going to pick up the win here. I'm going to go knockout. I'll say Montel Jackson, round 2 KO. I don't like the quick turnaround here for Figgy. It's kind of a similar thing for the guys in the co-main and the main. I don't love the quick turnaround. He's getting up there in age. Montel Jackson, young, hungry contender, I think he gets it done round 2 KO. And then we have arrived at the main event. I think a really interesting matchup here between Charles Oliveira and Mateusz Gamrot. And just for like how quickly Oliveira is taking this fight, I think this is a much more like, as a fan of Oliveira, I think this is a much more compelling, kind of safer matchup. It's interesting because like you can see the pretty clear path to victory against Fiziev, but you can also see like the major danger factor where it's like Oliveira, fresh off a vicious knockout, going up against a dangerous striker like Fiziev, like that fight could go really poorly. This fight against Gamrot, I just think stylistically is really fun. Oliveira is going to be the way more dangerous guy, I think, on the feet and on the mat in terms of actually finishing fights. He's a lot better in both of those areas, but Gamrot just has a style that's going to be tough for pretty much any top fighter to go up against. It just would suck to fight Gamrot the way he approaches matchups. Now, starting off with Oliveira's skill set, I think he is at his best when he is pressing forward, when he's mixing things up, working all three levels, working the body with the front kicks, the knees, finding the clinch, landing uppercuts in there, kind of forcing just these tie-ups, allowing him to force some of the grappling exchanges. He does have some really solid power and then can also just kind of overwhelm you with his pace, like we kind of saw in that Poirier fight where he just wouldn't stop. Even if he's getting hit, he's going to continue moving forward. And then from a, finishing perspective, he is elite offensive jiu-jitsu. He's first in UFC history in finishes and submission wins. And he also just has like a deep bag of subs that he can go to. He has wins in the UFC by rear naked choke, guillotine, anaconda, darce, triangle, calf slicer, and armbar. And then like I mentioned, he doesn't have like crazy like double leg, single leg takedowns. A lot of his takedowns are going to come from the clinch, but he can be very effective there. Some of the weaknesses, he is very hittable on the feet, also a little bit chinny. I will say he has pretty good recoverability where you can clip him, and it seems like he, gets his senses back pretty quickly, but he was also nuked, like vicious knockout by Ilia Topuria less than 4 months ago, and like 4 months or like less than 4 months is a quick return for someone who took 0 damage. It is a very, very short return for someone who ate the shot that he took against Ilia. Some of the other weaknesses, he does kind of have a tendency against good grapplers to accept the bottom position and just try to play guard when he should probably just work to get back up to his feet. When you are fighting the best dudes in your weight class, specifically the guys who are very good grapplers, it can be tough to actually submit those dudes, and you're just not going to have the same success you had against like dudes outside the top 5, the top 10, guys who are unranked. And then also just his age, like he's 35 years old, but he is like an old 35 in terms of just like time in the UFC, damage he's taken. Like Gamrot's 34, the age difference isn't crazy, but there is an extreme difference in terms of the tread on the tires. Now looking at Mateusz Gamrot, I feel like Gamrot's a really interesting example of someone who's just live to be in a competitive fight against pretty much like anyone in the top 15. Typically you have people where it's like, all right, they can pretty easily win fights against guys ranked 10 through 15, and then they might really struggle against the top 5 if you have those dudes that are ranked like in the 5 to 10 area. But Gamrot just has this style where he's not really going to pull away from some of the lower ranked guys, but then he can also give some of the top guys in the world some real issues. He's 8-3 in the UFC. He has elite cardio. He has relentless wrestling, averages over 5 takedowns per 15 minutes, hits those takedowns at a 36% clip, and then just consistently against strong competition, he can get the fight to the ground. 6 takedowns against Arman Tsarukyan, 4 against Jalen Turner, 11 against RDA, 5 against Dan Hooker, 4 against Beneil Dariush, and then 6 against Ludovic Klein. On the feet, he is a little bit chinny. You see him pretty consistently getting clipped in fights. He's been dropped in 4 of his last 7 fights, and that doesn't even include the Dan Hooker fight, where Dan Hooker also had him hurt on the feet. But kind of similar to Charles Oliveira, maybe even to a greater extent, he has great recoverability where you can clip him, and within like that split second of him hitting the ground, he will be diving for your legs. I want to say it was the Jalen Turner fight where I think he turned like multiple knockdowns into takedowns, and it kind of can sketch out the judges because it's like, did he actually get clipped there? Or like, was it just some weird exchange where he was shooting the takedown and it looked like he got hurt? So I don't know if it's just like instinct or if he intentionally does that, but He does a great job at it. And then some of the weaknesses, he's not great at actually controlling guys once he does get them down. And then in terms of like the best of the best, he just doesn't have a ton of finishing upside. I want to say his only finish in the top 15 was against Fiziev, and that was just like Fiziev blowing out his knee. And then I'll also point out that he is taking this fight on short notice. So I do think he's someone who's kind of known for always being ready, always being in the gym, but someone who does rely on his cardio, his pace, fighting a 5-rounder, not really, being prepared for it. That could potentially be an issue here. So this is a fight where I am very conflicted. I do think that Charles Oliveira is kind of over the hill. I think he's out of his prime. He's aging. He has taken a lot of damage. I think his chin might be cooked at this point. Like the way he got put out, I'm not confident he can take a punch from a lot of the top dudes in this weight class. But a lot of those issues are not really areas where Gamrot's going to test him. Like if Gamrot goes out there and just knocks him out on the feet, like the chin was just completely nuked coming into the fight. But Gamrot just has not shown that power to, actually put away the dudes on the feet, some of the top guys he has gone up against. It's also short notice for Gamrot. He took the Jalen Turner fight on short notice, picked up the win, but it was pretty competitive. I think Charles Oliveira is going to have the bigger moments. He also has the home crowd behind him. Not that that's somehow psychologically going to help him out, but I think if, he is threatening with a submission or really with anything, if he lands a big shot on the feet, he's going to be getting that reaction from the crowd. That could potentially sway the judges. So I have gone back and forth. I feel like I might regret this, but I'm still going to ride with Charles Oliveira. I just think Gamrot doesn't have like the power to really threaten him. I think if he's consistently shooting these takedowns, there's lots of opportunities for Oliveira to find a submission. And then on the feet, like I think Oliveira can kind of put the pace on Gamrot, attack the body, hurt him there, land some shots up top. So I think Oliveira is live to win pretty much by any way. I'm going to go with a round 2 submission win. I think he finds the sub. I think he could just naturally find a submission in the grappling exchanges. I also think he's live for like a club and sub, like in the Justin Gaethje fight. So I'd like to hear your thoughts down below. Are you guys riding with Oliveira, riding with Gamrot? This might just be like a coping pick of me not wanting Oliveira to be cooked, but we'll have to wait and see on next Saturday. But thank you all for stopping by. If you enjoyed, do me a huge favor, hit that like button and subscribe. Thank you again, and I will see you guys in the next one.